Hey guys, this is a pretty common question I get, which is, are Ivy League schools or top 20 schools kind of worth it? And in this video, I kind of want to break down what that means, what it is, if, the pros and cons of Ivy League schools, if it's worth it to kind of drive up your application and spend a lot of time, building your whole application and CV and resume to kind of make yourself competitive through these programs. So I'll start with the pros. The pro is prestige is probably the number one. You're probably going to be at a place where, it's going to unlock doors that you never thought was possible. Examples of this is that a lot of jobs recruit from colleges that are like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, Ivy League or Ivy League equivalent schools, UPenn, Cornell, like these schools all unlock a lot of prestige and recognition that, other places might not unlock. So like specific examples of this is places like going to Carnegie Mellon makes it a lot easier to go into quant jobs, which pay a lot and are really rigorous versus places that are not as well recognized for engineering and finance and computer science, just because there's a lot of prestige that goes in with that university, and then some companies won't even hire unless you go to that university. It's also a little bit easier sometimes to get into grad programs like law school or med school that are like really, really high prestige, just because you already go to a very prestigious undergrad. Sometimes it's easier to get internships or volunteer opportunities or job opportunities, summer jobs. It's also easier if you want to build your own business to kind of have this community of people who are all pretty smart and talented and all those things. So the prestige is definitely something to consider. Now, the thing that, is not as, something that they won't tell you as much is that, you can totally make it wherever you go if you work very hard. So prestige is not like the marketplace. A lot of times when we're living in a meritocracy, it doesn't matter as much prestige as it matters like the skill sets that you have, the merits that you've acquired, the hard work you put into developing a skill set or developing a talent. And a lot of times, having a good vision makes up for not going to a place that's as prestigious. But it is kind of important to mention that prestige is a huge benefit of going to these types of schools. The next thing is networking. So a lot of times you'll be added to an alumni network after you graduate from the college. And so if you want to start a business, or if you want to find job opportunities, if you want to make professional connections, having a really active alumni network that's really keen on helping its own people is pretty valuable, because it just makes life a little bit easier. If you're interested in like going to law school or something and you go to Yale and you like talk to the lawyers at Yale, that's a little bit easier to get into law school. Or if you're going to Harvard and you shadow a lot of the Harvard med school doctors and you see their work and you have one of them write your recommendation letter, it's a little bit easier to get into Harvard med school than somebody who's not going to Harvard. So networking is a pretty powerful advantage. Quality education. You're going to a place where there's a lot of talented faculty, where there's a rigorous academic program, and like it's been battle tested. You're going to a place that's renowned for its education. The resources are pretty extensive, so you'll get like state-of-the-art libraries, research facilities, extracurricular programs. There might be a lot of funding at your extracurricular program. So if like I once talked to somebody who went to MIT, and he told me about how they have an entire club that's devoted to building electric cars, and so they had like hundreds of thousands of dollars, not hundreds, sorry, tens of thousands of dollars to spend on that project. And it was pretty cool that they had those resources that other schools might not have. If you need financial aid, a lot of these Ivy League schools have financial aid packages, which makes it sometimes more affordable than your state school. Now, if you don't need financial aid, i.e. your family's making more than like 150K maybe a year, or I don't know exactly the number, it changes year to year, but if you're making enough money, the Ivy League schools can be pretty expensive. So if you make a little bit less than the threshold, they can have pretty generous financial aid policies. Okay, the cons are, the cost. Ivy League schools can be some of the most expensive schools in the country, and cost of attendance can be a really big barrier for some students. So if you're deciding between maybe paying like 80K a year for Harvard or 80K a year for Stanford versus like paying 10K for a local college in your community, that's like a pretty big difference, and it's kind of up to you to decide if the cost of attendance is something that you want to bear. And for a lot of people, the cost is kind of a huge factor, because it's not themselves that are paying, it's their parents that are paying, or it's their family members that are paying, or you have to take loans to be able to go to that school. And so if you want to end up doing something that's not in STEM, it might be a little bit harder to go to these schools where you're paying a lot of money, and then you don't have a clear career path where you'll be able to pay off the loans that you're taking at the school. Now, if you're doing something in STEM, it's probably feasible to be able to pay this off if you're going to go to like one of those top schools, just because, you know, you're going to be probably making a lot of money to be able to pay that off. And I think the major con I want to mention is the competitiveness. So I guess I haven't mentioned this, but I was accepted to UPenn and Cornell, so the two Ivy Leagues, and then I was also waitlisted at Harvard and Brown. And I also made it to like Carnegie Mellon and UVA and WashU and I don't know, a couple other schools. But just to I don't think people realize how competitive it is, how absurdly competitive it is, until they go through the application process and they realize that it's really, really difficult to get into these schools. It's just extremely, extremely competitive. You know, you have to kind of ask for tons of favors from teachers to write letter of recommendation letters. You have to be very competitive in different competitions. You have to kind of give up some of the things. I used to really love soccer, but I kind of gave that up in high school, which I wish I didn't, but it wasn't feasible for me to play soccer while also trying to build up this really competitive resume. It's very, very competitive to get into these programs, and I think that there is some benefit of that level of competitiveness, which is that even if you don't get into an Ivy League, you've kind of accumulated a pretty amazing skill set to try to become competitive enough to go to an Ivy League school, right? I know plenty of people that I think should have definitely gone to Ivy League schools, you know, amazing computer science achievements, amazing math achievements, like, or in the world, they won certain competitions. In debate, they won the Tournament of Champions, things like that. And I'm like, oh, and Harvard rejected you? I don't understand how they could have done that based on like just how amazing of an application you've done. And, you know, all those people that I know just ended up having amazing careers just because they worked really hard. They had already developed that skill set. They had already developed the work ethic. And so it is very competitive in high school to be able to get into an Ivy League program. But if you don't get into an Ivy League program, I think you'll still be totally set if you've kind of developed the diligence and the ability to delay gratification to kind of become competitive enough to even just apply or think about getting into these programs. So that's kind of what I wanted to mention about these programs. I want to just kind of finish it off with this one sentence, which is that you going to be fine wherever you go. And this is something that I realized just after graduating from college, going to like a top 10 med school and things like that, is like it matters way more how hard you work or how much of the resources you make use of when you go to a certain university or you're going to a certain program, right? It matters way more what you make of that experience than it matters, you know, the prestige and network that you're getting as a result of going to that university. You know, we live in a meritocracy where if you have a lot of skill sets and you've worked really hard, you're going to be fine wherever you go. And so if you kind of commit to an academic rigor, to a level of competitiveness, to just trying to be the best you can and serve the best you can and sort of help other people the most you can, you're going to be fine wherever you go. It's not the end all if you don't get into one of these programs. You know, you're bigger than that. And so that's kind of what I wanted to mention and really, really state and underline and bold and, you know, everything else is you're going to be fine wherever you go. And that's the end of the video. I hope that this was helpful. If this was really helpful, then consider subscribing and check out the other videos on my channel that will just help you be competitive enough to kind of develop the skill set. All right, see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.